You're listening to the Wrigleyville Nation podcast. Here's your hosts, Jeremy and Pat.
Hello and welcome to the Wrigleyville Nation podcast. This is episode 374 of the podcast. My name is Jeremy Deemer and I'll be your host. I'm joined as always by my co-host. He's my cousin. He comes to us high atop Wrigleyville tonight. How's it going, Pat?
It's going well, Jeremy.
We've got a lot to talk about. A successful week for the Cubs. 4-2 as predicted. I think I was
3-3 might have been my prediction, but you know.
Yes, no, this is exceeding expectations. We will recap quickly the week that was. We will talk about the injuries and the news of the day. And to help us talk about the Milwaukee Brewers as we learn about our enemies. We saw them for the first time this weekend as we started the calendar month of May. We've started divisional play, and we will dive deeper into the Milwaukee Brewers. To help us do that, you know him from all of his Wisconsin sports coverage. I'll let him run through the gambit, but also his many appearances here on this podcast. Yep. Paul Noonan, thanks for taking time out to talk Cubs with us tonight, and Brewers, of course.
Thank you again for having me. I once a year, I think, is about what you guys get me for these days. So, but I do the Milwaukee's Tailgate podcast about the Milwaukee Brewers, which publishes kind of all year round because there's always baseball going on. I also host Reporting is Eligible, which is about the Green Bay Packers. If you lean more that way, I'm actually recording a show later tonight, recapping the draft, which I attended and was super fun. So, if you're a Packer fan or just a Bear fan, curious about what the enemy is doing, go and check that out as well.
I'm always surprised by the number of Cubs and Packers fans. Like I run into more of that than I'm always expecting.
It is quite surprising. I feel like in the southern Wisconsin, Racine, Kenosha area and in northern Illinois, you do start to get into that sort of gray area, which over the course of history does make some sense because the Brewers, of course, have never won anything ever and have been atrocious for a good chunk of my life. And so, if you want the football team that is if you're just chasing glory, those are the ones you want to go for. So. Makes sense.
But if you're between 40 and 65, like you grew up with bad Packers football, right?
You did.
But if you're younger than 40, you know nothing but success. And if you're over 65, you might remember Bart Starr.
You get the dynasty. But the dynasty lives for, the 70s, the Packers were atrocious, but you have the memory of being dominant for that entire decade to kind of tide you over. Then the 80s were horrible for sure. And then, recent times, 1991 is when Brett Favre came to the team. That's a very long time ago now.
Don't remind us.
Yeah, it felt even longer when he was here. So yeah, so the Cubs closed the month of April, taking 2 of 3 from the Pittsburgh Pirates. It's the surprising turn here. As soon as the Cubs on that Tuesday game, Pat, put up 9 runs and shut out Pittsburgh, I immediately said I'm concerned that they're going to be struggling to get 1 or 2 runs the next day. Turns out they were able to scratch 3, but lost a heartbreaker. And then you had going into the Paul Skeens game, which we were all kind of like, oh, well, maybe not. And the Cubs roughed him up, gave up a lot of home runs, and the bats came alive, and they were able to defeat Paul Skeens to take 2 of 3 from Pittsburgh.
For the third time in less than a year, FYI.
Were you surprised by the offensive output against this Pirates team?
Well, look, when the Cubs are playing their normal 74 to 82 win seasons, they blow out the Pirates in the first game. They lose on a stupid error in the second game, and then Paul Skeens shuts them out in the third game, and we've somehow lost 2 out of 3 to the Pirates, right? When they're actually having a successful season, they overcome a game like the game with the error, either in that game or the next day by beating Paul Skeens via like a Dansby Swanson home run or something like that, which is what happened. 3 home runs, actually, almost in a row. and that's sort of indicative of what we've seen this year. The Cubs have more games with 3 or more home runs than any other team in baseball by a ton, and almost have as many 3 home run games as they had all of last season. So, we talked ad nauseum the last several years about how the Cubs didn't have enough power, and how they needed a real, legitimate bat in the middle of the lineup to solidify things, to make the Haps and Suzukis and everybody else that much better. And those two things have kind of emerged, and at the same time with the Kyle Tucker, and now with the PCA ascent, and now the Cubs have this long, deep, dangerous lineup all of a sudden. It doesn't hurt when your catchers are also hitting like Yogi Berra, but I'll take it, right? Take what you can get for as long as you can get. But given the quality of the teams they've played, even before the Pirates being the only team under 500 they played all year, but the quality of opponents they've played this year, you're 35 games into the season, and you've been able to put up pretty big offensive numbers against a variety of fairly decent pitching staffs. So, they haven't been dodging a lot of ace starters on teams either. So I think it's all good news so far, knock on wood.
The Cubs 21-14 as of the time of this recording. And Paul, you got to see the Cubs for the first time against the Brewers, and that offense really was on display for the Friday game, 10-0 in that one, and another victory on Saturday before the Cubs were Freddie Peralta'd on Sunday. Let's your thoughts, Paul, as someone getting to see this Cubs lineup featuring Kyle Tucker for the first time.
So none of this was particularly surprising. We preview the division on our podcast every year. We all thought that the Cubs would win this division by a significant amount. Kyle Tucker being added, a legitimate MVP caliber player being added is one thing. My surprise MVP, quote unquote, candidate this year was Pete Crow Armstrong, who, you guys know, came on very well late last season after struggling a bit out of the gates. And if you could teach a legit 5-tool player, a great prospect, if you could teach him to hit for power, he's instantly going to be in that conversation. And it looks like you've got that Pete Crow Armstrong at this point. So the lineup is pretty much a murderer's row of, Carson Kelly that's the one that will probably cool off at some point.
Carson Kelly, who just hit his 8th home run as a backup catcher, leading all catchers in home runs.
So here's the thing, Carson Kelly isn't even a bad sneaky get, because he actually has really good platoon splits. If you use him correctly as a sort of backup or off catcher, you can get that level of offense out of him sometimes. But he's actually hitting better against his same side, I believe, at this point, which is ridiculous and has never happened before. So,
Paul, we don't realistically expect him to hit more than 40 home runs this year.
Of course not. Why would you ever?
Which he has 8, but 40 would be great, because it's been a while since the Cubs catcher hit 40 homers. I think it was the guy after Damon Berryhill. Before Girardi, who was that? Rick Wilkins, I think.
Rick
was the last guy who
Wilkins,
did it.
yes. So in the first game, we threw Tyler Alexander out there, a perfectly fine middle relief journeyman type of guy that the Brewers will often shove out there for a random start, and works perfectly well against the Pirates and the Reds and the now Cardinals of the world. But when the Brewers try this stuff against the Dodgers or a real team in the past, it doesn't work. And none of us thought that was a good idea in this game, and it was not a good idea in this game. Tyler lasted 0.2 innings before giving way to Quinn Priester, who's he's a young guy. He needs to go through the pitching lab a little bit, but he is a off-speed deception merchant, not a big, huge fastball guy. Also not what you want here, especially with the recent articles being written about how the strike zone's contracted this year, something that actually I think is affecting the Brewers more than a lot of other teams.
Except for Suzuki, apparently. His is just as wide as it's ever been. Getting robbed a lot, is he? Yeah.
The Brewers have a lot of fireballers in their bullpen, but they have tended to make their starting rotation out of, with the exception of Freddie Peralta, who I'm sure we'll get to in a bit, out of kind of junk ballers and playing an outstanding defensive game behind them. And that is not working as well this year. So that 10-0 was not that big a surprise. Punting that game was not a surprise. And I think they'll have trouble with the Cubs all year. I don't think they're going to be able to get them out very effectively with their starting pitching.
Last year the Cubs got the Brewers manager, Craig Counsell, and we thought, okay,
yes,
well,
we know.
Well, now we'll have all the magic of these like wins that he pulls out of a hat, and it didn't work out quite as well as we'd hoped. But there were a lot of other flaws on the team. What we didn't realize is what we really needed is for Counsell to start luring the fake players to the team, like Colin Ray and people like that, who I always would look at it when they would play for the Brewers and say, "Oh, for crying out loud, we're going to crush this guy, aren't we?" And we never did, and now we have Colin Ray causing that same heartburn for other teams. It's really fun.
Yeah, it's good work if you can get it. Also, we have declined. Our manager, Pat Murphy, won Manager of the Year last year after Counsell never.
Craig Counsell's dad,
without.
basically.
Yes, basically, pretty much. I feel like the Major League Baseball Manager of the Year award is like the kiss of death, and it often happens in this way, where you had a good, solid manager who worked for a long time, never got recognition because it was kind of the usual thing. He leaves. The messages, the coaching is still there for a year, and then it drops off. Pat Murphy has been a huge decline in manager acumen this year. He's done a lot of bizarre stuff. The Brewers bunt a lot more than they used to. He definitely goes with his guts a lot more on pitching decisions versus Counsell, who is very, very much just tied into the front office and made the correct analytics move basically every time. So the Brewers are also taking it on the chin from that perspective. Too, Pat Murphy is not a good – he might be a good players guy, but he's a terrible analytics manager.
Yeah, Pat, you mentioned the struggles of Suzuki, but
well, not his struggles, the struggles of the umpires to realize what balls and strikes are when he happens to be at the plate.
Correct. Otherwise, he's had quite a this last series. Besides that, he's had quite a run up to this point, and
he sure
continues
has.
to have a big bat.
What a weird week for him. He struck out 10 times, but he had 6 hits, 3 homers, a double, a triple, and a single. And his OPS plus was like 1,000 something, because he was always there when you needed him. He has really been a guy who I think has benefited from having Kyle Tucker in the lineup, and I think in turn. Having Happ in front of him, and it's the domino effect. It's that 2007, 2008 Cubs thing we saw all over again, where you lengthen the lineup and everybody's better when there are guys on base in front of you and when you're facing more middle relievers because you're knocking pitchers out much earlier in the game. And, he's really done well. His power numbers are also up this year, as are almost everybody on the team at this point. Even somebody who's been struggling like Swanson has 7 home runs somehow in 30 games.
Yeah, we just talked about it last week that Dansby Swanson had to start getting out of his funk and start contributing, and he had a decent series as well.
He heeded our warning.
He did. So yeah, we've had enjoying the bats of Suzuki, Happ, PCA, Tucker, and like you mentioned, Carson Kelly. Continuing.
I actually have a question for Paul when it comes to PCA. So one of the concerns that we had last year with Armstrong was that he swings at a lot of pitches. And early in the year, it was pretty brutal looking because he would strike out quickly or he would pop out or fly out on the first pitch. People say, well, he's a speedster. He should be the leadoff hitter. And we're like, no, because he has fewer pitches faced than any other hitter in the league last year or something like that. But when he's going well, he hits the ball with authority. So here we are this year when he's having this fantastic year. He's still striking out a lot, but less than last year. Fairness. His ground ball rate has gone down. His strikeout rate has gone down. His fly ball rate has gone up, and his hard hit contact rate has gone up, which are all signs of, his line drive rate's about the same. But those are good signs, right? When you're hitting the ball in the air and hard.
Yep. Elevate the ball. Get it out.
The one thing that scares me and has always scared me about him is the guy doesn't walk. Like his walk rate is even lower this year than last year. He's like some kind of 1980s player coming out of like Andre Dawson in 1987. I can't walk. This team needs me to swing the bat and hit every time I'm up. Is that gonna catch up with him over the course of the year?
So We have Jackson Churio,
Yes.
a good analog to Pete Crow Armstrong on the other side, a little younger, but similar athletic profile. He also is not walking at all. I believe Pete has 6 at the moment, pending tonight's action. I believe Jackson Churio has walked twice, maybe 3 times all season. I think this is partially just you're a free swinger or whatever, but I have noticed, at least in the division when we've been playing people, there does seem to be a pitching philosophy with the younger players to essentially make them hit their way on and get themselves out. So I would not panic at this early stage of the season if he starts swinging too much at out of the zone stuff. Then you start to worry. But as long as he's slugging 559, and it's kind of same thing with Churio, like you'll take that trade-off all day. When pitchers start to not throw him stuff in the zone and he keeps swinging and everything, that's when you worry. And I think pitchers have gotten to that point with Churio, who was slugging like 630 for the first like 2 months or month and a half of the season, and is now swinging at junk a little too much. And it started to walk a little bit more, but needs to adjust back. So Pete Crow walked 21 times last season, had a good split between his batting average and his on-base percentage. It's a little low this year, but I think as long as he is hammering mistakes and when people stop throwing him mistakes, he lays off trash, that's okay. Second half of the season is going to be the determining factor there. I wouldn't worry about it yet. That slugging falls below 500, then you can worry a little bit.
I guess when you're hitting all the strikes with authority, it's okay. Yep. But he also managed last week to hit a ball, literally a ball, that was a ball. It was about 1 inch off the plate, and he hit it against the Brewers, I think, for a home run. And they said it was the lowest or the closest to the ground pitch to be hit for a home run in like 15 years or something.
I did see that. I suspect part of that is good prep work on, I forget who threw the ball, but we had so many junk ballers in that game. Like at some point you can guess the pitch and golf that puppy out of there.
And he did.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some of the Brewers players before we get to Cubs injuries and previewing the week ahead. I do want to talk to you, Paul, because the way the Cubs are playing the Brewers this year, we had this series in May. We don't see the Brewers again until June.
Yep.
Only 3 games. And then again in July, the end of July, 3 games. And then we get a series in August. And that's it. It's very spread out this year.
It's very different than last year, if memory serves, where we didn't play you guys after like August, if memory serves.
I don't think we played anybody after August in the division. It was weird.
It was weird.
Really weird. So, so I did want to get your thoughts on. So when, as Cubs fans, when we see this Brewers lineup every year, we go, "Oh, we're not afraid of that lineup," and then they come and destroy us every single year. Yeah. And it's always like, "Oh, that guy? That's the guy this time." Okay, and it's always a surprise. And
because you lose players that we thought were good against us, like Willie Adames.
Yeah.
And then you replace them with players who are equally as good, even though I've never heard of them.
We didn't do that this year, so you don't have to
noticed, and thankfully.
Yeah.
But like our catcher's, brother, like. What was up with that? Like we should have signed that guy, and then last year he had that amazing season. And then you bring guys up like my favorite Brewer sort of to watch is this Turang guy.
Turang's great. So.
Second baseman.
Yep.
He's fast. He's exciting. I like watching him.
He is good. And he was a 5 WAR player last year without hitting for any power at all, just spraying the ball around the field. I think it was Mike Petriello did a story before the season started on players who had changed their batting stances the most in the offseason. We track that now because we track everything in baseball. Turang was, I think, 3rd in terms of where he has changed where his feet go. It has resulted in quite a bit more power and stinging the ball more generally. And it has resulted in a huge uptick in his BABIP, in his on-base percentage, and in his home run total. He is an outstanding defensive player most of the time, although I will tell you guys right now, seems to have a bit of a case of the yips at second right now. Having some trouble throwing the ball and making the easy plays, still makes the awesome ones. But defensively, the Brewers have gotten weirdly bad to start the season, and Turang's
Yeah, their
part of that.
defense looked pretty shaky against the Cubs. I was surprised. That's one area where I haven't usually seen. I mean, you guys would play like Moustakas at like second base or whatever, and somehow get away with it.
When you could shift, yeah. It's a weird start to the season, and I've been meaning to dig into this more. I know we lost a couple of coaches in the offseason, but Willie Adames was bad at short last year. He's good hitting, and we missed the offense, believe me. But one of the mathematical fill-ins for Willie this year is Joey Ortiz is supposed to be much better defensively than he is, even if he's not as good a hitter. And he has not been better defensively. He has been a butcher at shortstop, and he's been an atrocious hitter, one of the worst in baseball. He has a 453 OPS at the moment. That is not playable at the major league level. Turang has also struggled. Basically, the whole infield has struggled on a team where that has been a strength for like 5 years now. And all these guys in the minors profiled as above average players. Ortiz is supposed to be a plus shortstop. Turang is supposed to be a plus shortstop who's playing at second base. So that has been a big issue, and nobody quite knows why that is. I've even asked Jonathan Judge about it a couple of times, and he's just like, yeah, they've been bad at defense. We have no idea why. It's really strange. So, stump that guy, and then it's a big mystery. But they've gotten some good performances. Rhys Hoskins, who they signed last year to play first base, was hurt for all of last year. And often in the recent past with Brewer first baseman, they've kind of let those guys go afterwards. They signed him to a 2-year contract. After a year of recovery, he seems sort of back to normal. He at least gets on base. He has a 372, or better than that, 381 on base percentage. He's slugging okay. So they're getting some offense there. Between him and Turang and Jackson Chourio playing okay and Yelich playing okay, their offense hasn't been terrible. It's been like an average offense. But their defense has been bad, and their starting pitching has been injured and very, very inconsistent. So the only reason they're like a 500-ish team so far is that while the Cubs have played one of the hardest schedules in baseball so far, the Brewers have already basically finished their White Sox and their Rockies runs of the year. So you can mark that down. Like, that'll regress over time. This team's not as good as their record, and their record is not that good. They'll get healthier. That'll help, especially pitching wise. But this is not the same Brewers team you've seen in the past. They did not replace third base. They've gotten worse at shortstop.
That Joey Ortiz has really struggled at shortstop replacing Adames.
Yes, he has. It's been bad, and their third base entirely is atrocious. So,
and I know
we feel your third base pain. We feel
this is a sore subject for Brewers fans, but I noticed that our buddy Christian Yelich is off to a slow start. I mean, he has time to recover. Surely, he's got 3 more years after this to play, so he got plenty of time.
Yeah,
contract wise,
I'm not too worried about him because he is. Just look at the difference between his batting average and on base percentage. Like, he's hitting 207, he's got a 312 on base percentage. Yeah. I feel like he has.
Is he afraid to swing? Do you think that's what it is?
No, he's hitting into some unlucky outs. He hit a home run tonight, so that'll be going up momentarily as well. But I think he's still like at least the average Yelich is still in there. He's still stinging the ball pretty good. He needs to start elevating a bit, but his bat speed's still okay. I think that's going to be okay. But there's just a lot of holes that weren't in this lineup previously, and people have exploited the heck out of it. I mean, we have a sort of a 3-headed monster at third base. Vinny Capra has negative half a WAR. Having negative half a WAR at this point in the season is incredible. Like, that's Yuniesky Betancourt in his prime terribleness right there. Like, we're starting Caleb Durbin at third base, who we called up, who's a prospect, but he has to like put all of his effort into every single throw to get it across the diamond to first base. He's not a natural third baseman. It's playing him out of position.
And then the Nick Madrigal syndrome.
Nick Madrigal, that's it.
And then the front office loves Oliver Dunn for reasons that none of us understand. He's clearly terrible. He's fast and he's an okay third baseman defensively, but he can't hit at all. And he's never hit at all. And he's had tons of opportunities now. So they left too many holes in this lineup. They were cheap, and now it's costing them.
Former Cub great Jose Quintana, age 36 and a half now, I think, is one of your ace pitchers. How long is that going to last for? Is he
I think a lot. They're good at getting production out of the Jose Quintanas of the world. The only problem with Jose is he is a nibbler, and if the strike zone narrowness continues all season, that'll affect him. But he's just part and parcel to how they build their pitching staff. So that he's been dynamite so far, and so I mean, he's a savvy veteran. I'm not too worried about him. He was signed to be an innings eater who can benefit from a theoretically good defense behind him. I'm sure he'll do his part, even if the defense lets him down.
The other area that I have to mention, because it's always frustrated me, is the Brewers have had this collection of closers who've come in. You know, Josh Hader was the bane of our existence for many years, and then whoop, he's gone. We're like, oh yay! And then Devin Williams just shows up and is just as good, if not better. And it's been going on and on in an annoying fashion now for almost a decade. But has that finally caught up to them, or are we missing something?
So I don't think it's caught up to them. That the pitching lab of the Brewers primarily generates relief pitchers, and they still have those. That is the strength of the team still. They would actually look a lot better if not for Joel Payamps, who is been in the reliever rotation, who had a good year a couple of years ago, but has fallen off. I think is kind of unplayable at this point, and so they give guys some leash, and they should have given him less. But Trevor McGill throws in the hundreds and is their closer, and he's been fine.
Great, by the way.
Yes, Abner Uribe throws harder than McGill does, and his only problem is that he occasionally beats people up and gets suspended. Not, by the way, important note, on the field, not off the field. I would rather have him getting into fights on the field than off the field, so that noted. But he is one of the best raw arms in Major League Baseball. They fill that in with like guys like Nick Mears, who's pretty good, and I got to go down. It's such a long list. And they have guys in waiting, too. They just actually sent Craig Yoho back to the minors, who struggled a little bit in his first taste of Major League Baseball, which is fine. But they also have Jacob Mizorowski, who throws in the low hundreds and is just kind of waiting to develop a little more control before he's the next closer in waiting. So we prefer pitchers who throw in the
80s, but high 80s, because we have a hard time seeing the ball when it goes that fast and tracking it to home plate.
Well, that's our starters. We trade that for only Freddie throws in the 90s in the starting lineup, so that's how we roll.
Paul, last question for me, then we'll let you get out of here. You mentioned at the top that you had in your prediction podcast, had the Cubs winning the division. Where did you have the Brewers finishing?
I think I had them second, but after the Cubs, other than the Pirates, it was a pretty big mishmash of kind of all the same. So I did Cincinnati's in second right now. I know I definitely viewed them as like the next possible contender, and so I'm not surprised that they are hanging around at this point. I don't like St. Louis. I think they're bad. Pittsburgh just is, other than Skeens and some pitching prospects, is good. But I also thought that the Brewers might disappoint more than expected this year, because I don't like it when my team has very obvious flaws that they don't do anything at all to fill. That's, I think, poor management. The Brewers are a small market team, but they have more budget than they have allocated this year. This was a very cheap team that they put on the field. And you guys signed a potential MVP. We did not. So we didn't do anything like that.
My question for you, my last question, has to do with some of your younger players. Do you see Jackson Churio aside, who I think is going to be a star, who I really like watching play also. He and Turang are the two that I am the most envious of. But as between like Sal Frelick and Garrett Mitchell, who do either of those strike you as somebody who's going to be a solid outfielder / hitter in your lineup, or what's your take?
Fun question. Garrett Mitchell, but they are like two different sides of the development coin, and the Brewers have definitely gone to one of those sides going forward. Garrett Mitchell has had a couple of really impressive months when he's been healthy with the team, but his problem in the minors and in his stints in the majors, when he's gotten to sample size, has been his strikeout rate is absurdly high. And we've called it unplayable before. He at least has some power. He's got a good defensive floor, so he can be useful. But that guy needs to hit home runs to actually stay in a major league lineup.
Has he hit a home run yet this year?
I don't think he has. He has struck out 25 times in 78 plate appearances, and that's the downside of Garrett Mitchell. And I think once pitchers have figured out where to, by the way, high fastball, just do that. He will strike out every single time. Sal Frelick is a prospect who I wasn't super high on, but the recent Brewer prospects that have worked have been high contact guys where they've been able to build up enough muscle to get them enough home runs and doubles to be effective offensively while playing a great field, grit in the field. They have everybody is a center fielder in their outfield, Frelick included. He plays right field, but he's that good. Last year, he barely ever struck out, made contact every time. He added some muscle, best shape of your life type guy, but it does actually seem to be the case for real that he's actually added some sting, some power. His bat speed's increased on Savant from last year. He's making better contact. And so I like him a lot better as a prospect going forward. Like, he definitely has a skill. You can add power and muscle if you can make contact, and he's always going to be a virtue in the field. Mitchell's good in the field too, but he can't stay healthy, and he strikes out way too much. So, like Frelick, I think Terang's ascension is actually real. Like, that power is going to stick. But when the Brewers get a contact-oriented prospect, that's when to pay attention to him.
Paul, always a pleasure catching up with you, helping us learn more about the Brewers. And before we let you go, we have a segment where we close the show profiling a Chicago Cubs player from the past, and our guests get to choose a Cubs player for us to profile. So let us know who you would like us to profile.
Can't be Trevor
week.
McGill, though.
No problem. I would like Vance Law, who was very good in 1988, and I wonder if he could have repeated that in 1989 if things might have been different.
Vance Law, a great pick. Looking forward to that one. Yes, absolutely. Paul, thanks again, and we'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Awesome. Really appreciate it. All right. Excellent.
That's a good one. I have his baseball card. He was on that team that had like 6 All-Stars, Palmeiro and Dunston and Grace and Sandberg and him. It was a crazy year. And the Cubs won nothing that year, 88. Nothing. No. But they had 6 All-Stars.
All right. Pat, a 4-2 week wasn't all great. Devastating news, as we saw in that Brewers game, Shota Imanaga running over to cover first base. We saw him come up lame, holding the hamstring, and he is on the 15-day IL with a left hamstring strain. It's getting further evaluation. As of the time of this recording, we don't know how long he's going to be out for. Could be upwards of 6 weeks, worst case scenario.
Could be 2 or 3 weeks.
Could be 2 or 3 weeks. So we will know more. You will know more by the time you've listened to this podcast. But
hopefully, I honestly, Jeremy, I don't know if any of us will know really until we know, right? Like, that's one of those injuries where, you can judge the degree of the strain or whatever when it first occurs, but how fast it heals and how comfortable he is pitching, that's going to be something that will be sort of a play it by ear situation. Which brings me to my idea, which is, what if the Cubs just forfeited all their Sunday games? Think about it. You could get an extra day of rest. Nobody gets hurt. You can save a pitcher. You go to a 4-man rotation, really, at that point, right? You just never play on Sunday. Would they have any fewer wins if they were to do that? No, of course not. They'd have the same record they have now. I think it's worth looking into.
Yeah, it's absolutely wild to see how the Cubs have won only one Sunday game this entire season. We're into it's 2 months in. They've only won a single time.
I don't even remember that game, so I don't even know if it counts.
So yeah, absolutely devastating. Hopefully, so. Now you've got Justin Steele gone for the year. You've got Imanaga gone for weeks. Cubs have to make a trade, right? Like, this is it. You have part of the schedule here where you're playing the Giants and the Mets this week, and then it lightens up. You got the Marlins, the White Sox, more Marlins before you get Reds and Rockies. So
But you
you've
don't want to
got
lose
some time.
those games either against those easy teams, right? Like, the last thing you want to do is have a non-competitive start where your starter gives up 7 runs in 3 innings and you lose a game to one of those teams, like 8-6 or something. That'd be awful.
No, Paul just
Uh,
talked about how the Brewers padded their schedule with a bunch of these games, and now they're going to hit the hard part of the schedule that the
Right.
Cubs have already done. You don't want to negate the great job that the Cubs did in those tough games by giving up these these quote easier wins.
So the Cubs have Thursday off, which is helpful, I suppose. That
All
gives them-
Thursdays. They don't work
all Thursdays. They don't play on Thursdays. They don't play on Thursdays or Sundays. Apparently, that's their 2 days off. So that's helpful. I think there are 3 options. One, like you say, we've talked about this already. Make a trade. I think the Cubs will have to make a trade, period, at some point, because whether even when Imanaga is back, I just don't think they're going to make it through a whole season with the Matt Boyd, Colin Ray miracle starts, and and Ben Brown. I mean, I think going into the playoffs, they're going to need a veteran pitcher, right? So who they think is good and can rely on, whether it's Dylan Cease or Alcantara or somebody, we'll find out. But I think ultimately that's the play. I don't know if they're willing to do it yet, although I always think it makes sense to do it sooner than later. They did that with Quintana, actually. Remember when they got him before the All-Star break, and in 2017, and it worked out great for 2017. He took him to the playoffs, and they went to the NLCS. I mean, that's I'll take that. Option number 2, which you hear a lot of people talking about, is bring up Cade Horton. Like I think if the Cubs are going to make any kind of a prolonged run where they win a playoff series, I would imagine either someone via trade or Cade Horton will have played a major role in that. And so the question is, do you bring up Cade Horton? He's only played, I think, pitched like 4 games in AAA or whatever for the minors this year. So he hasn't had a lot of innings. He was hurt last year. But, I feel I have this Kerry Wood vibe of like, well, you don't want to use up all his bullets in the minors, right? Like bring him up to the majors. And a lot of people are suggesting they do that. How much worse could it be? That'll be
you got to find
that,
out what you have right now.
Yeah. And maybe with the Thursday off day, that buys them a little bit of time. And maybe they can get them another start in the minors before they bring them up if they think that'll make a difference. The other option, I think they could lean on, and some people have been bold enough to suggest this, is they could try out Chris Flexen, newly acquired Chris Flexen, in the rotation. He pitched in that Brewers 10-0 game, doing what I have always begged the Cubs to do, which is when you've got a blowout game, rather than pitch 3 guys 1 inning each, right? When it's 10-0. Let one guy go out there and pitch 3 innings, and he did, and he 3 shutout innings. He got a save. You get a save for that. That's a fun stat, no matter what the score. Great, save the bullpen, get him some work. Maybe you use him as kind of an opener / guy who you try to get 4 innings out of. That's another possibility. All I can say is that when you're in New York against a tough team, that's a tough place to play right now based on their lineup, especially with Soto and Alfonso or Alonso, and Lindor doing so well. I think you have to be careful. Whoever it is, is going to face a real test. So maybe you don't bring Cade Horton to that situation for his first game. Maybe you do a Flexen. Maybe you push everybody up a day because of the day off on Thursday. I don't know, but it seems like those are your 3 options right now, unless you want to take another whack at Jordan Wicks. I can't name too many more people that are left that you can credibly rely on.
No, you wish Javier Assad could slide in and take a few of these.
Yeah, that injury is going to come back to haunt us. He's that guy who could eat so many innings for them, and he'd be perfect right now as a swingman. And not having him is going to be rough.
Let's look ahead to the week that will be, as the Cubs are playing 3 at home against the Giants before, as you mentioned, going to New York and playing 3 at Citi Field against the Mets. So, your predictions for the week?
Well, I think again, if the Cubs can go 3-3, win 2 out of 3 against the Giants and maybe lose 2 out of 3 to the Mets. I think that's, given the division, given where they're at, given what the record is right now, that'd be a perfectly credible start. Your 7 games over 500. Why not? And then you get into that soft stretch of the schedule that you mentioned earlier with those 9 games against very poor teams. I could go for that. I mean, could they do better? Sure. With the rotation the way it is right now, hard to say. It's hard to rely on much. To say that they're going to win 4 out of 6 is of the 6. That's asking a lot right now. But we just saw them do it last week, so anything's possible, I suppose.
The remainder of this Giant series, you have Verlander and Ray tomorrow. You have Ray and other San Francisco Ray, R-A-Y, taking on Ben Brown on the Wednesday game before the Mets series. Your prediction for the week of 6 games?
3-3.
3-3. Okay. I feel that they take 2 of 3 from the Giants. They lose 2 of 3 at the Mets, and that is a 3-3 week. So I think we're unanimous here, hoping to be pleasantly surprised with it. Maybe they sweep the Giants and surprise us, but
anything better than 3-3, and you really have to start getting excited. At this point.
Absolutely. And let's close out the show, as we always do. Our Cubs player profile of the week. And every week we look at a Cubs player chosen by our guests for us to profile from Cubs history. Pat, tell us about Shawon Dunston, one of my favorites as a kid.
Yeah, this is really kind of our sweet spot here, Shawon Dunston. Shawon Dunston was famously born, somewhat famously, I always remember this, in Brooklyn, New York. And he was the first overall pick in the 1982 draft for the Cubs after that horrendous 1981 season. And with a lot of fanfare, they drafted him out of high school as a shortstop. There was another player that the New York Mets drafted 5th that year, a guy by the name of Dwight Gooden, who would have been an interesting pairing with Rick Sutcliffe throughout the mid to late 80s. Probably would have resulted in a few more divisional championships, but I will say that I went back and I looked at that draft, the first round of that draft was awful. Like, you see names, you look at the names on there, and it's like, who are the best 4 players drafted in the first round? Dunston, Dwight Gooden. You could argue Gooden was even better than Dunston, I suppose, if you go by stats. Ron Karkovice, Spike Owen, that was it. Those are the only names I'd even heard of. It was awful. None of these guys even made the majors, or if they did, they had negative WARs, ridiculously negative WARs. Yeah, it was a really bad draft, but the Cubs managed okay, right? So they get Dunston. He was, really young when they got him, just out of high school, and he ascended through the Cubs minor league system pretty quickly. He was the starting shortstop by 1985. So think about it. They drafted in 82. So he only had a couple of years, 2 full seasons in the minors. Now remember, 85 was following up on the 84 season. So the Cubs had Larry Boa, the aging veteran shortstop, but they had the young Ryan Sandberg, second base, and the aging Ron Say at third, young Leon Durham at first. And I think the idea with Dunston was they wanted somebody with a little bit more range than Boa had at that point, because Say had very little range and had already contractually agreed that he would no longer dive for balls. So they needed somebody who could play good defense at shortstop, and Dunston they thought was ready. He came up, struggled mightily, as a lot of players do, was sent back to the minors. 85 turned out to be this horrendous season where all 5 starting pitchers were on the injured list at the same time. Everything went wrong that could possibly go wrong. It was coming off the 84 season when they did so well, it was just an awful year. Dunston ended up coming back in August and September when the Cubs were far out of it, and played a little bit better, and they felt, pretty good that he would recover. We always talk about how with young players, progress is not linear. No one said that in 1985. Those are not words that were ever spoken by a human being. All they
Sure.
said was, well, he took his lumps and, went back to the minors, and now he came back and, he's going to be better. Anyway, so he comes back up. He's the everyday starter by 1986. At that point, Bo was like 39, I think, right? And then had a couple injuries. In 87, he broke a finger and missed half the year. But then he came back in 1988, and he was only 25 years old, by the way, in 1988. I mean, think about the Cubs players now who are young. I mean, other than PCA, who's a super young guy, when you look at by 1988, Dunston is now in his fourth season, right? And he's 25. I mean, Michael Busch is 27, and he's in his second season, right? So I mean, he was a young kid, and he comes up and plays really well, makes the All-Star team in 1988. That was the year the Cubs had like 6 All-Stars and failed to make the playoffs somehow. And he was even better in 1989. He probably had his best season professionally in 1989, which of course is your favorite year, the Boys of Zimmer.
That is my team. Yes.
He helped the Cubs win a divisional title, and they made the playoffs. He hit .316 against the Giants in that 5-game playoff stretch. So you can't blame him for their failings in the playoffs that year. Did a really good job. And that was the year when Shawon Dunston kind of had, I guess, in Cubs lore and maybe even national lore at the time, he had this outsized, he always had kind of an outsized popularity and presence than maybe the underlying stats would suggest, right? Because he was the number 1 overall pick in the draft. He was very energetic. He was always he was a very friendly player. Like people liked him, right? He was a likable guy, and he also could throw the ball through a wall, right? Like he was major league managers and front office people routinely said he had the best arm of any infielder in baseball, right? And now, mind you, that was the Ozzie Smith era, so he wasn't going to win a Gold Glove per se. Also, the fact that he didn't always throw the ball to Grace. Sometimes he threw it, into the stands or had other issues, but he had a great arm and he was a lot of fun to watch. He was a fun player. Like he's kind of in a PCA kind of way. He was fun on the bases. He was fun. The field, he was fun. So one of my friends, wasn't my friend at the time, but subsequently became my friend, Dave Chila, and his buddy, who were just out of college, decided one day to go to the bleachers, and they made a sign. They called it the Shawnometer, because he had just broken over 200 for his batting average that year. And they thought, well, he's obviously going to go up from there. So they created the Shawnometer, and it kind of caught fire, and it became kind of a national thing. And that you saw it again with Kyle Schwarber. They had kind of a follow up to it, right? So, but the Shawnometer was the original one, and it was really weird because it started versus the Mets in the bleachers in a home series, and they ended up like following through on the gag all year long. And even in the playoffs, they flew out to San Francisco. Old Style offered to pay for all their tickets and then to give them cash if they would put an Old Style symbol on the sign itself. They refused the corporate branding and foolishly went ahead and went their own. But you got to the point that year where the Cubs, were doing really well, and it was getting harder and harder to get tickets. But you know how it was back then, like before electronic tickets, the Andy Frainos, whoever was doing the tickets, would just kind of let them in, I think, if they needed to. Anyway, so Dave and his buddy did this all year. That sign, that Shawnometer sign, is now in the Smithsonian, by the way, if you're wondering where it is. And it has a lot of future lore and to it. And I was at the 30th year celebration of that back in 2009 at Murphy's Bleachers. And anyway, it's got its own saga. Dunston was a big fan of it. The other players were a big fan of it. They all had Shawnometer T-shirts. It became kind of like this cult thing. And if it were to happen today, obvious shirts would have their own Shawnometer thing. It would be, of course, yeah. And with social media, it'd be even bigger now than it was then. But they would always show it on ESPN because the Cubs would play the day games, right? So when ESPN or whatever the TV stations or might have even been ESPN at that time at nighttime. Would show the sports section, they'd show a picture of the sign in the outfield because, the Cubs were the only game they could talk about because the other games hadn't been played yet.
All the time. You saw it in every video highlight. You saw it in newspaper clippings. It was everywhere that it could be in that point in time. And even now, if you go down a YouTube rabbit hole of some of these games and some of these old Cubs clips, you will still see how much the WGN crew would focus in on the Shawon-o-meter.
Yeah. Let's see. And then so 88, 89, good years for Dunston. 1990 makes the All-Star team again. That was really his peak time with the Cubs. He had an unfortunate situation. He missed much of 92 and 93 because he herniated a disc in his back and had to have back surgery. For a shortstop, that's not a great thing. And when you're still in your 20s, that's, also not a great thing. So he was slowed down for a couple of years, and he came back in 1995, had a really good season, one of his best seasons with the Cubs that year. And then at the end of the year, the Cubs decided and elected not to bring him back so he signed as a free agent with the Giants for 1 year. And I think he had some hurt feelings for that, in that situation, and ended up hitting 300 for the first time in his career with the Giants, of course, without the Cubs. Cubs decided to go a different direction. They went the direction of Ray Sanchez, who had negative WAR for the year and was really not really probably the person you wanted in his place. And so then the following season, the Cubs brought Dunston back to be the shortstop in 97. I kid you not. So he actually got to play as the double play combination with Ryan Sandberg for basically a decade. Like, that's a long, the Dunston to Sandberg to Grace, was a long standing thing. And certainly the Dunston Sandberg situation, they play together. You talk about Trammell and Whitaker, but there aren't a whole lot of double play combinations. Lopes and Russell, I don't know. I'm trying to think, in history that lasted as long as they have, at least in modern history, in the free agent world, right? That have lasted as long as they did. So that was kind of a special relationship. There are some really good Dunston and Mark Grace stories that I'm not allowed to tell in this forum, but could be told at the Ginger Man or somewhere else at another time.
Yeah,
I've been given information on, but yeah, it was a good career with the Cubs. He ended up after that season in 97 playing for, I'm going to do this in order very quickly: Pittsburgh, Cleveland, San Francisco, St. Louis, New York, St. Louis, San Francisco, all in a period of time. Ended up playing 18 years.
Wow.
Long career. So, that's,
especially after having back surgery, that's an impressively long career.
First round draft pick, that's not bad, right? He ended up hitting 269, which is perfectly reasonable for a shortstop, with 212 steals, 150 homers, 1,597 hits in 6,200 at-bats. He only walked 203 times, though. He had more stolen bases than walks. He had a lot of PCA in him when it came to his swing approach. He never saw a pitch he didn't like to swing at, that's for sure. And he, back in those days too, you didn't get dinged for not walking as much, right? You could, as long as you're getting on base. And that's what he did. He got on base a lot, almost never walked. He had a son, Shawon Dunston Jr., you might remember, who was a Cubs prospect drafted by the Cubs. There was some promise there. He didn't make it, as it turns out, but was in the Cubs minor league system for a couple of years. We were kind of pulling for him, hoping. But what I did not realize is that Jasmine Dunston, Shawon's daughter, did you know this? She was named director of minor league operations for the White Sox in 2022.
I did not
Yeah,
know that.
3 years ago. I had no idea. So there's definitely baseball in the Dunston blood. He's a real fun Cub. He's a fan favorite. He's somebody you can really get behind and root for. And I'm glad that he was presented as an option, because we've now had Sandberg and Dunston, which is nice, because it kind of represents that period from the mid 80s to the mid 90s when the Cubs were the pre-Cubs of what they are now, but fun nonetheless. Yeah.
So do you think Dunston at some point is in the Cubs Hall of Fame?
Yeah, I thought he was in the Cubs Hall of Fame, but I don't think he is. And he should be. because he was a good ambassador for the Cubs, in addition to everything else, right?
Yeah.
It took a while for Sammy Sosa to get inducted. Yeah, he is in the Hall of Fame. He was inducted with Mark Grace in 2023.
Okay.
It was the year before we had the situation with Sosa and was it Ramirez last year? And then next year's going to be Derek Lee.
No, yeah,
Sosa and Lee, and next year's going to be Ramirez. I don't know.
The year before was Ramirez. Yeah. It was Ramirez and Kerry Wood. Yeah.
That's right. It's whatever. It's come on. They should all be in the Cubs Hall of Fame. It'd be nice if they could do them all together. Like do Grace, Sandberg, and Dunston together. Do Lee and Ramirez together. Do Wood and Sosa. That would be hilarious. Wood and Sosa together. Yeah. No, he's one of my all-time favorite Cubs. Always will be.
Me too. Yeah, just really fun to think about all the great Shawon Dunston memories, and him and Ryan Sandberg. That was him. That team, that '89 team, Grace, Sandberg, Dunston, Dawson. Like I loved that team. That was my, and they were winning. It was like, wow, this is it.
Well, and don't forget that team had a pitcher by the name of Rick Sutcliffe.
Yep.
Who almost won the Cy Young Award that year. Should have won the Cy Young Award that year too. They had, I think they still had. Mitch Williams was the closer that year. Remember the Wild thing? And that was
right.
Yeah, it was an interesting all-around team. And they also had at the time the Rookie of the Year and the runner-up Rookie of the Year on the same team, Jerome Walton and Dwight Smith. Dwight Smith, who sang the national anthem several times. So you can talk forever about that team. That was just a fun. They had Lloyd McClendon on that team, and Mitch Webster. Girardi was on that team. Curtis Wilkerson was on that team. Doug DeCenzo was on that team. That was a fun team. Marvell Wynn, Luis Salazar. Come on.
Yeah.
They had Maddox and Sutcliffe. Sorry, I go on and on, but it was a fun team.
It absolutely was. And with that, we are going to wrap it up for this week. Pat, anything you want to hit on before we call it a podcast?
Let's just hope that the Cubs can weather the storm with the pitching injuries. That's the one thing, my one concern. We started the season thinking they were thin on starting pitching and probably bullpen, to be honest with you. And the bullpen seems to have smoothed out a little bit, as it miraculously does for some reason by May of most years. And the good news is the bats have been able to carry the team, unlike the last couple of seasons early in the year, to a degree that has put them in a good position. But the starting pitching's got to get healthy. They need some reinforcements.
Make sure you're following the show on all the social media platforms at Wrigleyville Nat. And of course, we need your help over at the YouTube channel. Go to youtube.com, search for the Wrigleyville Nation podcast. There, I need you to give us a subscribe and a like on the podcast. That's where the video version of the podcast can be found. Even if you don't consume your podcast via the video form, you can, just by giving us that like and subscribe, helps us work the algorithm so other Cub fans can find the show. Your dad's enjoying the YouTube broadcast of the show, Pat.
Yeah, it's all ages.
So we highly recommend the video version. If you want to continue to listen to the audio version, obviously make sure you stay subscribed on your podcatcher of choice. If your podcatcher of choice is Spotify, you also have the video version there as well. So both the audio and video is also available on Spotify.
That's a good reason just to have Spotify, really. Probably the only major reason.
Your likes and subscribes help us. So continue to do that. And most of the help for this show comes from our patrons over at patreon.com/Wrigleyville Nation. That's how we keep the show ad-free for another season. They help us keep the lights on. They helped us get, just last week, we got a USB adapter for Pat's computer.
It's great.
So we couldn't do it. Every single penny goes right back into the show. So if you want to support the show, every dollar helps over at the Patreon, patreon.com/Wrigleyville Nation. And with that, we're going to wrap it up and call it a podcast. Pat, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thanks again, everyone, for listening, and we'll talk to you again next time.